Good evening and welcome to the City of Dublin's Architectural Review Board meeting. For those of you in the audience, this meeting is being live streamed, so you can access the video of this, future or past meetings on the city's website. If anyone is watching, the meeting is being held at 5555 Perimeter Drive in the City Council chambers. The procedure this evening for each case, the staff will make a presentation followed by an opportunity for the applicant to make a presentation. Board members will ask initial clarifying questions. We will then see if there's any public comment, and that may be public comment that we've received either in mail or electronically, or if anyone here wants to make public comment. And then after that, we'll begin to deliberate and hopefully come to a decision on the cases this evening. If you would all stand, we have a tradition. We start our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you would face the flag and Judy, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Cotter?
Here.
Mrs. Cooper?
Here.
Mr. Jewell?
Here.
Stamus?
Here.
Mr. Alexander?
Here. Is there a motion to accept our documents into the record and approve the minutes from the April 26, 2023 meeting?
Also move that we accept the documents and the minutes from April 26th.
Second.
I had one shoot, and I wish, no, I'm glad it's seconded because I wanted, if you want to call it a discussion, I had a correction. I thought it was with the Bulliard residence. There was just, there was a swap of names. I thought something about ownership. Oh, yeah, it has under applicant presentation. I'm on page 8. I'm in the minutes, page 8. It says Heidi Bulliard, architect. Is that correct? She is the architect and the owner? Oh, okay, then never mind.
Okay. No further discussion of the minutes? All right. Judy, when you get a chance, do you want to call the roll?
Mr. Jewell?
Yes.
Ms. Stamiser?
Yes.
Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Cotter?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Our board is responsible for review of construction and modifications or alterations to any site in the area subject to architectural review under the provisions of Zoning Code Section 153.170. This board has a decision-making responsibility on these cases. Anyone who intends to address the board on cases this evening must be sworn in. So if you think you're going to be addressing us, if you would raise your right hand and answer in the affirmative. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony this evening? Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Our first case is case number 1, the Bulliard residence at 60 Franklin Street. This is a minor project review. It's for the construction of an addition to a 1-story home on a 0.35 acre site, zoned historic district, historic residential. The site is located northwest of the intersection of Eberly Hill Lane with Mill Lane. Ms. Holt will be our presenter. So Sarah, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, everyone. The site is shown outlined in yellow on the screen, and it does sit between Franklin Street and Mill Lane. It's opposite the community church in Eberly Hill Lane. These photos show both the front and rear of the site, and vehicular access is from Mill Lane at the back. The request before us tonight is a 286 square foot addition for a master bathroom. It's outlined in blue and it's located at the rear of the house. This is the south section with Franklin Street to the left, and this just shows the relationships of the proposed addition to the original form of the house and then the 2020 addition that was approved by the board. The original house is on the left. The 2020 modified gable is fully rendered. The main or original gable is shadowed in. The 2020 addition is shadowed in the back, and then the new bathroom addition is in the bold line weight as shown. This east elevation shows how all the different elements will work together, and here the 2020 addition is on the left, and tonight's request is on the right, again bolded, and items of note include the height of the addition is below the main roof. The addition is inset approximately 2 feet from the original house on the right side. The materials are to match the existing house, and we'll get to those details in a moment. And then the deck and stairs located on the left side of the addition mirror those existing on the 2020 addition. These are the materials that do not require waivers, and again, they will match those already in use on the house. We have the Certainteed Landmark roofing in driftwood, the Stonecraft manufactured stone in Bucktown Heritage, the Dutch quality sill in brown chiseled, and the TimberTech deck railings and square spindles in black, and those are located up front here. Materials that do require a waiver include AZEK in a smooth finish for the trim and fascia, the FIPON gable vent, also up front, the TimberTech decking in Kona, that's up front as well, the Geldwen vinyl windows in white, and those specifications are in your packet. Staff consulted with our preservation architect, and together we determined that consistency is really the greatest goal here. We did look at perhaps having this addition meet or more closely meet the current code and guidelines, and we really all decided that this is the best approach for this particular property. The colors are proposed to match those on the existing house. So we see Downing sand for the stucco, Roycroft bronze green for the cedar shakes at the gable, and then extra white for the trim and column details. So looking at our first waiver, which is the use of AZEK on various trim and detail locations, criteria 1 and 5 are not met, but again, per the report, this is balancing how to be consistent on this particular structure. All other criteria are met or are not applicable. The second waiver is the use of FIPON for the rear gable vent, and here all criteria are met or are not applicable. The third waiver is for the use of vinyl windows. The same as with the first waiver request, criteria 1 and 5 are not met, but for the same reasons. All others are met or not applicable. And finally, the fourth waiver for TimberTech on the rear deck steps. All criteria are met or are not applicable. Looking at the minor project review criteria, these are met with conditions and or waivers, or not applicable. So staff is recommending approval of all waivers as noted, and we recommend approval of the MPR with one condition regarding lighting, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Board members, any questions?
Sarah, we've approved TimberTech in several places before, right? And there was something on the river, there was 2 or 3 other ones. So let's call it more standard.
You remember correctly.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
In the vinyl windows from when the 2020 edition, and they were vinyl windows, I have to say I didn't look that close to see what was the reason they were approved on a waiver the first time. It just came to me when I read that Gary, you might have been here. I don't remember I wasn't
I
here for
don't,
that one.
yeah, and I don't recall ever approving, another board may have approved that. I can't ever recall approving vinyl window. I'm not questioning the rationale.
Yeah.
Here and the staff's position on it, but I can't, but it would be unique.
Do you remember? Because it was added from the 2020 edition. They're all the same, but
It was approved in 2020, and going through that staff report, there didn't seem to be a lot of discussion. Now, perhaps the applicant
okay.
can shed some light on that.
Okay. Those are my only two questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
The applicant?
Jeffrey Bulliard. I'm the applicant and owner.
And
Um,
just for the record, state your address too, please.
60 Franklin Street. Sure. So back in 2020, that was approved predominantly about 60 to 70% of those were relocated windows, was partly why that was approved. As well as the rest of the existing house is all the same windows. So
Okay, so resisting and relocated from where? Sorry, let's.
from when that expansion took place, when that addition took
Yeah.
place, the windows throughout that were relocated onto the new facades.
So the rest of the windows are the same and you reuse those? Okay,
Yep.
all right.
Would you like to, since you're up here, make a presentation?
Sarah pretty much covered it. I don't have a whole lot additional, just can answer any questions that you guys may have.
Any initial questions for the applicant? Do we have any requests for public comment on this one?
Not on this one, no.
Okay, all right. Board members?
The only question, so we're gonna lose a tree on the backside, right?
There is one tree that would be affected.
What's the width or diameter of that tree, that Buckeye tree?
It's a small tree. I believe
Okay.
it's a 6-inch, but again,
That one's got significant size. It's not 24 per the code. It's about
Correct.
it's about 18 to 20 inch diameter.
Okay, that was my question, just questioning that. So if we're gonna lose it, I mean, we're just trying to preserve the canopy down there too, so any thoughts about putting a new tree up would be greatly appreciated someplace else.
All right, do we want to work through the motions? Okay, first motion is to approve the AZEC material waiver. That's a material we've approved before.
No issue.
Okay, is there,
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the ASEC material.
I'll second. Yes.
Ms. Cooper,
Yes.
Ms. Damasser,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
yes.
Mr. Joel.
Yes.
Okay. Then is there, the second motion is to approve the Five Pond gable vent.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Joel,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes,
Mr. Cotter,
Yes.
Ms. Damasser,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper.
Yes.
all right, motion number 3 is to approve the vinyl windows, the waiver for the vinyl windows.
Well, my only question is, should we put in regards to why we're approving the vinyl window, just for record?
I think they'll be in the minutes anyways, because
Okay.
I think it's already been stated,
Just-
so.
Wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve the vinyl window waiver.
Second.
Ms. Damasser,
Yes, sorry. I didn't realize my
Joel,
mic was.
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes.
Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Cotter.
Yes.
Okay, motion 4, for approval of the TimberTech stairs waiver. Is there a motion?
Also move to approve.
I'll second that.
Yes.
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 Yes. And finally, motion 5, to approve the minor project with the one condition.
I'll move to approve the minor project with one condition as stated before.
Second.
Before we call the roll, I just want to ask the applicant, are you aware of the condition and are you okay with that condition?
Can you restate that condition just to be clear?
Yeah, it's on the screen now that any additional lighting shall be reviewed and approved by the planning staff at the time you apply for a building permit. So they want to see the fixtures.
Sure. Yeah, there's
Okay.
no exterior at this point. So
Oh, okay, well, that'll make it easy. All right.
Mr. Cotter,
Yes.
Ms. Damasser,
Shut it off again. Yes.
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes,
Ms. Cooper.
Yes.
thank you. You're approved. Okay. All right, our second case this evening is James Davis House at 5707 Dublin Road. It's a minor project review. It is a request for the construction of a two-story residential addition on a 0.75 acre site zoned planned unit development, Llewellyn Farms. The site is located approximately 300 feet north of the intersection of Hertford Lane. Ms. Singh will be our presenter, and Rati, whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Thank you and good evening. This is a request for a minor project review for a two-story addition to a historic home located at 5707 Dublin Road. The 0.75 acre site is located in Llewellyn Farms. It has approximately 150 feet frontage along the Dublin Road. The site is shown here in yellow. The next few slides will show the existing conditions of the home and the site. The home is listed in the National Register of Historic Places. It is a Greek Revival home which dates back to 1840. The home is characterized by large cut stone coins and a recessed entry facing the Dublin Road. The iconic hip-gabled home has a simple rectilinear facade, and one can see two brick-burning fireplaces on the north and the south. The front facade is symmetrical with 4 fenestration bays. These are the north and the south elevations. The front portion of the historic home is 2-story towards the Dublin Road and 1.5-story at the rear. We can see wood brackets at the eaves as a simple design element, and there is a minimal use of fenestrations on north and the south side. The rear of the home is 1.5-story with front gable roof facing the rear yard. Simple elevations characterize all the 4 facades of the home. In addition to the large cut stone coins, use of stucco is seen. The warm tone and the natural colors gives a unique overall look to this historic home. The existing roof is metal seam in blue silver grayish color. Here is the recent case history. The board reviewed the minor project review application in April 2023. Listed here were the board's concern for the proposed addition. Applicant has made some changes and addressed the concerns. All the concerns and actions are further detailed out in the staff report. 5707 Dublin Road and 5715 Dublin Road shared a driveway, and there were concerns with regards to the easement. An easement agreement has been provided, and staff further consulted the law office and has been confirmed that this matter should be handled between 2 parties privately. The board had concerns and reservations with regards to the plan form, elevation, massing, height, and materials. There were discussions with regards to design alternatives, and applicant was encouraged for conceptual reviews. This is the proposed site plan. The existing home is shown here in blue, along with the add-grade patio, shared driveway, and the shed in gray color. Applicant is proposing to add approximately 2,200 square feet addition to approximately 2,350 square feet home. The shed is proposed to be relocated at the southeast corner of the site within the setbacks. It is shown here in yellow. The red line shown here represents the older footprint. Applicant has made changes to reduce the width of the home to not to be wider than the historic home and retaining its character facing the Dublin Road, and thus meeting the guidelines. These are the proposed north elevations along with the design alternative. Here on the top, we can see proposed north elevation as an option A. The existing hip-cabled historic home is on the left in the light gray color, facing the Dublin Road, and the proposed addition is on the right. Applicant has reduced the rear mass and eliminated the use of dormer windows. A 412 pitch side gable hyphen connects the rear facade of the historic home to the proposed 2-story building addition. The rear portion has pitches of 312, 412, and 612. The maximum height of the proposed addition is approximately 22 feet 7 inches, and the height of hyphen is approximately 12 feet 7 inches. Staff recommended simplifying the roof pitches to meet the historic guidelines. Staff further worked with the applicant to create an option B in line with the recommendations as a discussion alternative for the board. It is shown as an option B at the bottom of the screen. We can see a hip gable roof on the main addition and the use of shed roof on the garage. There is an overall increase in the height, however sensitive to existing historic home. Staff will recommend option B with the reasons as outlined in the report. This slide shows the south elevation, both with the options A and B, very similar to the previous slide. The historic home is seen on the right in light gray and addition onto the left connected via the hyphen. As discussed, with the use of hip gable roof and the shed roof on the garage, the addition has increased in height by approximately 1 feet. Staff recommends evaluating a grading plan and consider an option of lowering the plan by 1 feet to minimize the height impact. A site analysis is also included in the staff report. Slide here shows design alternatives for the rear elevation. Option A is the proposed elevation with 612 side gable main on the main addition. The garage has a 312 and 612 front gable roof. The current option A does not align with the guidelines and not taking design cues from the existing roof form. Option B on the right-hand side shows the use of hip gable roof on the main addition and it is in continuity with the historic home. As discussed in report, further analysis can be done to explore the design option. While working with the options, staff has explored a hybrid option. This could be a use of hip gable roof at the main addition and the shed roof on the garage. This would allow the rear height to be lowered, however, will still be a little complex. Here we can see the building sections for the proposed design by the applicant for option A. The section is through the whole house and is seen on the left with the existing house, and the right-hand side shows in gray color is the existing house. Additionally shown here are the building sections through hyphen and the garage. With the recommended hip gable roof and its impact on the height, design strategies can be explored and overall height can be reduced by lowering the basement height or stepping the finished floor level down as described in the staff report. These are the proposed materials. Applicant proposes to use Hardy Lap siding in Arctic white color for the hyphen and cobblestone color for the main addition in the cedar mill texture. Arctic white matches the existing shed. However, staff recommends using a smooth texture to match the historic wood siding, and this is included as a condition of approval. Applicant proposes sculptured stone in Bella Bland at the water table. Staff recommends providing a stone and a mortar mock-up. Applicant has confirmed that the stone sills and headers are not being requested for the windows and the doors. They were previously included in the staff report. The metal roofing colors will match the existing roof color in the silver smith color, which staff supports. Applicant proposes to use architectural corbel similar to historic home on the south-facing porch. Staff will defer to board on this element. The applicant also proposes to use 5-pound gable vents, which will be painted to match the Arctic white siding. Anchorage outdoor wall mount lights are being proposed on the north and the south facade, and staff supports that. The garage doors are MR Corsica doors in walnut color. A waiver will be required for that. Applicant proposes the aluminum-clad windows, which are not shown here, but they were previously approved in 2021, and they will match the existing home windows. Apart from this, all the windows, frames, rakes, and soffits are to be painted in Sherwin-Williams paints to match the existing blue and gray trim. The proposal will require few waivers. This is the waiver for the hyphen roof pitch 412 as proposed and the garage roof 312. Most of the criteria are either met or not applicable, except that the need of the waiver is not caused by unique conditions or special circumstances. Planning recommends approval for the roof pitch waiver. Applicant proposes to use triple-layered heavy gauge steel with 5-layer paint system garage door. The criteria are mostly met, and planning recommends approval. The proposed design will use two 5-point gable vents. This is to create an architectural feature on the facades. The criteria are mostly met. These are the minor project review criteria as listed in the Historic District Code. The review criteria are mostly met with conditions. Staff recommends the design solution provided in option B to best meet with the code and guidelines. This is included as a condition of approval. Planning recommends the approval of the roof pitch waiver, the garage door waiver, and 5-point gable vents waiver. Planning also recommends approval of minor project review with the following conditions. Design to be revised to either option B or hybrid option per the board's decision prior to the building permit. Applicant adjusts the floor height to address the height concerns prior to building permit. As previously mentioned, staff received word from the applicant late this afternoon that stone headers and sills are not proposed, and thus planning removed this condition of approval. This was previously listed in the staff report. Elevations to be revised to show smooth hardyboard siding, and also applicant to provide utility plans detailing the scope of work, reviewed, approved, and inspected by engineering prior to building permit. With this, I'm happy to answer any questions. Applicant is in attendance, and there has been a public comment. Thank you.
Before we get to that, though, any questions? Initial
No, I
questions?
just have a question. So on the B option, the roof pitch, I couldn't read, is it 612? I couldn't zoom in far enough. On the back, on the
Yes.
rear facing gable roof,
Yes.
it's 612.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
What will the window trim be? Will it be what's shown on the drawings? Because it sounds like that potential for some use of cultured stone is now not a part of the report, so.
Yeah, I would defer to the applicant for this
Okay.
because we've not received further details with regards to this.
Okay. Okay. Would the applicant like to come up?
Hi, Emily Lukasik, 5707 Dublin Road.
Heidi Bolliard, Simplified Living.
So let me first start by saying we do want to thank everybody here for your feedback last time. It was a great discussion, and as we reflect on where we are today with this design that we are bringing in, we are actually much happier than where we were in April. So we are very happy with the trajectory that this is taking. In general, we do want to make sure, though, that it is clear we personally strongly prefer option A. That is what we submitted. We obviously made option B as a visual as we discussed the feedback from the staff. There were a couple things that we had in mind when we did this design. We heard your feedback on reducing massing. We heard your feedback on reducing complexity as much as possible, and at least maintaining, if not lowering, the height that you all thought was likely okay as long as we reduced complexity the last time that we spoke. This plan A, does all of those things. We strongly prefer option A, looking forward to the discussion here as we get into it, and we can certainly discuss more on some of the specific call-outs. And then lastly, as it relates to the hardy board, at the end of the day, we're fine with the smooth hardy board. We're a little curious about that one. It calls out the reasoning to switch to smooth is to better match the historic wood siding of the house. There is no wood siding on the house currently, so I wasn't exactly sure what that was referencing, but that is not a problem in our eyes. And then we have no comments on anything else. We're good with the others.
Anything else?
In terms of the trim that you had just asked about, it's the hardy trim, which is what we had called out on the drawings previously as well. So we had accidentally mentioned in the application that it still had stone. Yeah, the cultured stone header and sills, and like not thinking that that was previously, we had a plan where it had a window in stone, but that stone was all lowered down to just the base of the structure. So any window trim would just be the hardy board.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Any initial questions? We'll answer your question about why the smooth in a minute. I think you pointed out something that is correct. Our preference tends to be because in that particular product, the embossing is so heavy, it looks artificial. It looks more like vinyl siding than wood siding because the wood grain is so exaggerated. So that's why we try to use, in this particular product, we try to recommend the smooth. And it's not a unique position to this architectural review board.
Okay.
Okay, so public comment.
We heard from William Tabor from 5605 Dublin Road, and he writes, I'm a retired American Electric Power employee. I retired in 2002, and my career was the budgeting, scheduling, and construction of major projects for the company. My specialty was getting them built on time and within budget where possible. Historic houses and buildings give a community a sense of where they have been. I will admit that I have more than a little bias over changing any historic structure away from what it was intended to be or the period look that it has. I do understand that we now have cars and not horses. The original stone house at this location was a simple 2-story construction. In my opinion, the addition of the very broken up roof line to the back of this structure greatly distracts from the simplicity of the original house. It is not in keeping with the original design or the look of the original house or period. It simply looks like a new structure that is stuck on without consideration to the original. A good job was not done in keeping it simple with the lines of the original. Thank you for letting me comment.
Did he comment? Was that comment based on the earlier documents? Do you know when that was dated? Just out of curiosity.
We received this comment today,
Okay.
so,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Then that's it. Obviously, there's nobody else here to speak to this. So, okay. All right. I thought maybe we'd review, since we're at the deliberation point, we'd kind of review the big issues and work from size, height, down to details. So, clearly it's been brought in as we requested. So it no longer projects beyond the edge of the house. Is everybody, how do people feel about the footprint? You okay with the general footprint, the size?
Yes, and I actually very much appreciate your listening to us.
Okay, so we're all good with the footprint. Okay, now, one of the big items, because it impacts the appearance and which particular elevation, is height. How do you feel about? Now, option B, if it's done as initially drawn, would be higher than the submission for option A. It's still lower than the existing house. And the flat drawings don't always reflect accurately the way we see things as they actually diminish the further away they are from us. So how do you feel about the heights?
First of all, you listened to what we said, made an effort to make it lower. Because I was the one that was strongly in making sure we wanted it to be lower. So I appreciate that. I'm not opposed to either height. When we get to the roof, I think the roof pitch, I think that discussion will help us find our way to this, and the grading. I'm the one that wanted to push it lower. So for me, where it is now, and as you say, from the road, it's going to continue to look like it's subordinate as what we looked for when we had the discussion last month. So I'm okay with either one, but we'll come to the roof pitch and try to decide which way.
Okay.
Yeah, I concur. Let's look at I think the roof pitch to get to that point. So you did make a comment though, your strong preference of option A versus option B. What do you feel you're losing?
I guess thank you. If we break down let's start with the garage. Option B, we recognize is slightly simpler in design. However, the size of that structure and the size of what it then needs to do to the roof to reduce this complexity feels very large to us. I know Heidi, you had some concerns as well with just the size of that.
Yeah, the scale just seems really, really wide, especially from that west elevation. And looking at other homes through like Old Dublin and different historic homes within Dublin, unless you have a barn, like there is nothing really that wide that's been constructed.
How about the height of the volume of the house, the volume of the addition beyond the garage? And I think Michael's question, part of that is, why do you like the actually lower version with the gable that actually looks taller? That's what the staff has done you a favor by suggesting the hip, because it does two things. Even if it isn't lowered, it does two things. It gives the perception, because there's less wall surface that's visible. It gives the perception that it's much lower than the gabled version. It also ties back to the house better. The other thing is it takes your eye away from something that's insignificant. The focal point of the gable is the vent, and that vent's not significant. That's an insignificant feature. It's not a consciously designed architectural element. It's something that comes out of the catalog. So, I mean, I would not say it had to be lower if it was option B in that area.
And I would say we feel the same way. As long as we don't have to cut into the interior ceiling height as suggested in option B, then we would be okay with doing the hipped roof at the higher height.
Because you raised the plate height.
Yeah, so with the gabled roof, we had clipped ceilings inside the interior, but if we're gonna hip it, because the inside of the pitch has to be even lower, it really reduces the height within that space. So it needs to be raised up to 8'1".
And that is why we originally did not suggest that. But if we are okay with having a slightly higher roof in that section, we would be okay with hipped.
So if they were okay with B in that area with the height that's drawn without the reduction, because the height that's drawn is not reduced, right? The height that's drawn in the document today. So.
And that's how
that's
I'm seeing it. Yeah. So I don't want you to give up something for something that's just a matter of design.
So I'm just taking the straw poll here. So we're all okay with the option B at the height that it's shown in the drawing you submitted.
For the two-story structure.
Or the two-story
For
structure.
the two-story.
Okay.
Yep.
So we've talked about height in that area. So I think we've come to a point that at least the board can agree. Okay, so let's talk about the height in the back.
So, just if I talk from the shed, if I look at A on the shed roof side, let's say okay, I see what you're saying, because it's essentially the same, from a width standpoint, it's the same, right? Yeah, both are the same. So what's your concern about simplifying the roof line or not simplifying the roof line from the massing? I didn't understand what you were trying to tell me.
Talk about.
I think the one thing is with that, it ends up being a 31'4" long wall. And if it's for option B, whereas in option A, we set in that back shed roof just to separate that, just so that the trim properly terminates at the back of the structure there. So it just reduces that whole look of it. I think on option B, it's
Are you able to move over to the original option B, not the hybrid?
I think.
So you're saying you put the trim, you're putting that hip in there, moving it back, or the trim in there, so you can make a visual break of
Well, and
the
two, it's
mass.
set back in 16 inches.
Yeah, right.
Just to, give a visual break to those, just to create some separation between those two structures, just to bring the scale of it down. The scale at the back of option B there, it's a big structure. And honestly, I don't think it's very attractive whatsoever. And I've not seen anything like that anywhere in historic Dublin for that large of a long wall.
I'm just trying to see. It's 20. Would you say the height?
31'4".
31'4", but the height on the boat is 23.8 and 22.3 maybe, or 7 or something like that. 7? Okay, so it's a foot. The height is a foot and you're gonna have the width and you don't have the breakup. Okay.
And I'm assuming, I didn't see second floor plan in there. We saw, but that's okay. I'm assuming you're not trying to use that area for storage or, because it's such a big volume in option B and there are no windows to break up, that's part of the reason it's the size, the height, and the blank wall. So you're not going to access it. Okay, so it's not, so you don't need that much space.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
It does take away from what the original building looked like, right? It's the visual cue, but
So-
I see what you're saying about
Exactly.
breaking it up. Huh? I see that, yeah.
When you
It's-
mean by part, or the space on the back of that, don't need that space, what did you mean in
Second
reference
floor,
to
you're
that?
talking about,
'Cause
you're
too,
talking
the
about what's it?
The master bathroom actually sticks behind the garage through a portion of that.
On the
Right,
first
but I
floor.
was talking about the the space in
Yeah, got it.
above the gabled volume at the
Right.
rear. So I wanted to verify that you don't need that as usable space.
No, it's
Yeah.
not planned space for anything.
I kind of liked what you're trying to do back there personally. But what I was going to suggest, because I think your offsets aren't great enough. What I would have suggested is you can put a metal roof on a lower pitched roof. So the shed has a 212 roof, so it doesn't climb up, because right now it climbs up so high on that existing roof that it's pretty similar to option B. It's pretty, kind of massive. So if you drop that down and you made the recess instead of 1.4, you push that wall back 2 feet, 4 inches. So then, because you're trying to break the big volume up. And I think, I kind of like B, the idea of B is a miniaturization of the existing house. And I think that's kind of a clever way. And a lot of designers will do that in a historic setting. They miniaturize that house and say, look what we've done. We're really being sensitive. But the result, and even staff has struggled a little bit what to do with that roof. And so I was wondering, well, do we really lower the pitch on that? But it's still going to be pretty big. So I thought some version of the hybrid that Roddy put up earlier,
Mhm.
maybe the best approach back here. But that's just I don't know how other board members feel. That's just my opinion.
Is that identical to what option A was?
Almost.
Just her outline that she had drawn, is that identical to what we had in option A?
The hybrid is effectively the larger structure from, the larger structure from option A, I'm trying to remember what the
It
hybrid
is the garage from option A and the hipped roof
Yeah,
from
and-
option
but
B.
they're
They're just
identical. There's nothing
overlaid.
actually like.
There's nothing
changed
different.
in option B, the blue outline and the hybrid.
Yeah.
Sorry, Andrew Stowe, 5707 Dublin.
Yeah, just to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. We're looking at the drawing on the right,
Yeah.
and we're saying, the 2-story volume of your addition with the hip roof and at that height is generally fine. And we're saying what's in blue, which is kind of like your A, but I've mentioned a couple tweaks I think would make your idea
Right, by lowering that
work
to a 212
better, work
roof
better.
instead of.
And break, because your goal is to break the volume up, and I think that's a problem back there.
Mhm.
But I think your idea would work better that way.
But I also want to, just talking about that being an additional roof and like breaking up the structure. Like I believe that last time, our last submission with having all of the dormer roofs and things like that on the house, like I think that we had close to 9 roofs on the house and we brought it down to 4. So we've also taken in consideration your comments. So like taking it from one large oversized roof on option B and cut it or breaking that up into 2 separate roofs. Like we are totally good with changing that and lowering the pitch to a 212 and also setting that in from 1.4 to 2.4. Like we have no problems with that, but we would still like to maintain two roofs back there.
Yeah, and I think we're saying, at least my comment is, yeah, you would have two roofs. And I drove some of the newer houses that we've approved back there, not near this, but are pretty animated in terms of multiple forms.
Yes.
So I didn't feel like if we were able to work out some compromise here, that this is necessarily, a dangerous precedent. It is, I agree, it's much simpler. There's a hierarchy here, which was lacking in what we were looking at before. So
Gary, just maybe one, so close. You want to move the pitch. So you want to shallow the pitch.
what I'm talking about is the
You're talking
section.
this pitch, you're
Yeah.
trying to get to
The
212.
section on the right would not change of the
Correct.
blue.
Yes,
So we're just
correct.
talking
Clear.
about the blue.
Yep.
The section on the right would not change at
Yes.
all. But the piece to the left that's meant to look like a shed would have a lower roof pitch. So it wouldn't climb up as high.
So you're
the
trying to make the
gate.
massing look slightly, you're trying to
Right. So it
soften
wouldn't
that a little
climb
bit
up
with that.
as
Yeah, okay.
high.
I understand.
And then in their floor plan, that plane is back 1'4".
Yep.
And what I was suggesting is if you push it back another foot, 2'4",
Then it's going to
then
give a different depth.
then the offset and the idea that these are two different things, I think will read better.
Yeah.
The broken mass for me, originally I was looking, now you've explained, and now I see how you're trying to proceed. And then I see what your rationale and what you're trying to do. So I'm actually now coming a bit more on the, okay, I don't know about the roof pitch, we can talk about that, but on the broken up mass, more on the option B or hybrid B for me. Now I see what you're trying to do. And then I see the cue you're trying to do, and it actually looks, it's grown on me now since last night when I looked at it. So
We
And-
get it.
and
It's
you
a
feel-
balancing act.
Yeah, and you feel that's kind of going to give you what you need?
Yes, absolutely. And this is
Okay.
the discussion we had in making
Okay.
these designs, as we recognized that we had to weigh simplicity, complete simplicity with,
Okay.
just design, aesthetic, and all of that. So we're very much aligned with what you're saying.
Okay.
okay.
Marty, you've been pretty quiet. Is that okay? All right. Well, I just want to make sure you have an opportunity. Okay. All right. Okay. So we've talked about the size, the massing, the roof lines. Should we talk a little bit about the details? So it's going to be two colors, actually, plus a trim color. Is that right? So the hyphen will be one color, and the body of the rest of the addition will be the other color.
And the trim will be which color?
The trim will match the existing house, which is the blue-gray.
Great. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Well, the question I'm gonna just say, because did you want to differentiate some of this? Is it differentiated enough? When I look at those colors, when you just look at the ones that are sitting there, do we think it's it's in the sunshine? In here, the light is kind of difficult to tell. That's from our side. We always want kind of a nice contrast. What do we? Do we think it contrasts? When I looked at on the picture, it looks, and we look here, there's not a lot to it.
It'll contrast from the stone
Yes.
dramatically.
Yeah.
So are you thinking the two colors should have more contrast?
Well, I'm just saying.
That's what I'm
between each other,
wondering,
There's from the hyphen to the house, to the addition, so one, what was that?
The
going west.
guidelines don't require that the hyphen and the addition be of different materials. Is that correct?
I'm sorry?
The guidelines require that any addition have different materials or be somehow distinguished from the original,
Yes.
but there's no requirement that the hyphen and the addition be distinguished from each other.
No.
That's what
We just at times said it's nice to have a better contrast there. So we've pushed some to be slightly more contrast, just so you can really see the form moving. It's a question that we have, because we've had the question come up.
Would you want the potential to have three colors now?
I don't know. I would not want to have. Nope.
Because the trim, there's significant contrast between.
I don't want to have three colors. It's just a matter of these two colors. For me, they don't look very far apart for me. So it's just a matter of it's more aesthetics. I'm not pushing the point, but if you look at them, maybe my color acuity is not very good, but they look pretty close to me.
Well, you're right.
Yeah.
These, you're going to get the material pre-finished. Yeah. See, all of that company's pre-finished colors are
And I
like
think the one that's,
kind of washed out.
Yeah.
like that. So it's just the nature
Yeah.
of the,
and one of those were on that board, it's not being used,
It's
right?
not being, yeah, the other one's not being used. I mean, in the sunshine, it just seems like if you look at those,
Yeah, I
it's
can see.
darker. Maybe
I can
it's-
see different.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
The one on my right, facing you,
Mhm.
is, has some gray tones, some greenish tones to it.
Maybe it's just me.
Oh.
So, I mean, it's not a push for me. I just, for me, we've wanted to make sure that it was clear that there was distinction as we move down that. So we're okay. It's okay for me. Yeah.
okay. Okay. Um, okay, so the other details, how, does anybody have feelings one way or the other about the use of the corbel?
Can we flip back
Yeah.
to the front of the house picture, please?
After looking at this, would you like to see the drawing that shows then how the new ones, once we get a sense of how these are used, how the
Yes,
new
please.
ones, okay. Roddy, could you put the elevation up? So you can see the two corbels.
It's only on the hyphen,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, I don't, yeah, it works for me. Yep.
With those elevations up, is the window trim then just going to be picture framed without any kind of sill? It's just going to be trim wrapping them?
Yeah, we were looking to truly keep simplicity within the trim,
Okay.
or really all of the details on the home.
So the siding, is that drawn? What width is that? What's the exposure?
It is 6-inch reveal.
Yeah, we can't, just the size. Okay, so it's a 6-inch reveal. And then the corner boards and the trim width, what do you think? What is that going to be?
The corner boards is 1x4,
Okay.
and the window trim is also 1x4.
Okay, so they'll be 3.5. Okay. Any other questions?
On the other, through that, just only on the garage door. Just the reason, because it requires a waiver. What's if we're done with the trim, just move it to.
Yeah, no, go
just
ahead.
for the garage door, just understanding why you picked something that requires a waiver.
And actually maybe should clarify with Roddy, what is specifically about our garage door selection
Well,
did not meet criteria.
Yeah, it's not a wood, as I recall here. It's not in the approved. It's not wood.
It's a metal door.
It's a metal door. So
With a wood finish, with the wood appearance of a finish, the walnut finish.
but it's metal. Is it?
Yes.
It's a metal door. So
Yes.
that's the.
Really just to reduce the
Say for
maintenance of.
durability and maintenance,
of the-
yeah.
Of the door instead
We've
of
done
using a wood
metal
door.
doors before. I don't remember. I have to admit that's not a. I don't remember metal.
We have approved composite doors
Yeah.
that use materials other than wood.
Okay. Yeah.
So I didn't look closely at the spec, whether because some of them are actually insulated, so they
Is it
provide some benefits.
I believe that this door was also approved at 158 South High Street.
Okay. This is a material question. We need to
Yeah,
we need to
no.
talk about in the
Yeah.
future too, huh? Because
Well-
we keep having these. Yeah.
And we get these material questions and they come back down
Yeah.
the road. So,
Understood.
yeah, because typically we don't approve metal doors
Yeah.
because there's other materials there. Are you like hung onto this metal door or are you okay
No.
with options?
This was the first we have discussed this at
Oh,
any
okay.
extent, so No,
Yeah.
we were not particularly married to it, but
Yeah, if
we
it's a
really looked at the
composite
look
It-
and
yeah.
for durability in a composite. Yeah.
Is the specification information handy because is it a metal structure with like a synthetic on top of that?
Give us 1 second and we will.
So then, yeah, typically it'd be a composite then,
Yeah,
right?
because I'm,
The
the way it's
specification
drawn,
submitted.
and I
It
can't be just painted metal.
yeah, I'm thinking it's a composite.
Yeah.
It's structurally, it's metal, but it has,
And I think that's what.
or we could we could Google it. What was
I
it?
don't, I just don't see, it doesn't look like it's on one of the. I don't see anything about garage, so.
Was that information provided with the first
Yes,
application?
so the garage doors are triple layered heavy gauge steel, and they are 5-layer paint system done on the garage doors.
So it is just paint on the door?
Yes. It's painted in the wood texture and it is steel from inside.
Hmm.
Not sure I'm visualizing that very well.
Have we approved a door that's just metal on the outside? I thought all those doors we've approved have been composite.
At 83 South High, we just approved a composite that had a metal core with layers of, if I remember correctly, I think it was sort of a textured, almost a PVC, and then painted. That was the most recent garage door that we've approved via a waiver.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not necessarily opposed, but I just want to make sure that we know the reason we're if we're going down a different path, make sure we know what's the reason and
Or maybe we want, and it wouldn't necessarily have to come back to us, depending on how we want to handle it, but maybe we want more exploration of a composite door that may not have metal exposed on the exterior, but because you may get something that looks closer to wood.
That's absolutely fine with us.
Well, and they make that style door, that exact style of a door in a composite as well.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Kind of seems to be our preference is
Yeah,
going to
of
more
course.
composites, just keeps
Absolutely.
us consistent and sounds like you're okay with considering that, so
Yes.
that would work for me.
The one detail I'm a little concerned with for two reasons is the way the stone's being used. And so when we approve non-traditional materials, we want them used in a way that is you'd see in a traditional building. And one of the challenges is when we say, okay, you have to cover your foundation with another material besides concrete or concrete block, is that foundation needs to be in line then, because if you look at the way an old house is built, foundation doesn't stick out because you don't want to catch rain. The house, so you need to cantilever your first floor framing out past that so your framing lines up. Now, if you don't do that, then a more contemporary way of applying this, which, and that presents certain problems, and it presents even more problems for you because you're so close to grade. But I worry, one, it's not being used in a traditional way. Two, without a cap, you can't get, first of all, you're not able to seal that top edge. So water's going to get through there. So that will eventually spall off. So if you had, like the previous applicant had a linear cap, so you can't get this stuff straight either when somebody lays it up without a cap. So if you're going to use it the way you are and take it higher than the foundation, then I think you need a linear cap. Now, sometimes people use cut limestone because then you can bring a flashing down in the wall, projects out on that, so that gap that water will invariably find is hidden. And so, and also it keeps your wall cleaner because that cap sticks out past the stone. So any water drips off that. So, you know, if you want to make it look like the traditional foundation and tuck it back in, that's fine. It's because your floor is so low, you're not going to see much of it. So it seems like it would be a waste. But I do think if you're going to use the stone, the height you have it, it needs to have a cap because it's going to be in a short time, it's going to be a real maintenance problem.
Well, and also because we do need to use a 2x6 wall for construction for insulation purposes, it is possible to do the cantilever of the wall out 2 inches so that the stone could be.
Yeah, I mean, usually it's done with the floor joist, so that plane of the
exactly.
floor comes out. But your floor joists are already so low that the distance, that's why
Oh, I see.
I don't think you could easily do that here. And that was one of the reasons too, I was worried about if you had to lower that floor even more, because you've got issues the building department will point out about how you have to protect that wood. Because it's your first floor is not 1 foot 6 inches off the grade. So there are special precautions that they're going to force you to, but that's beyond what we do. We're just dealing with the exterior. So, but I just think the stone could be handled better, and it's going to make a big difference in about 3 or 4 years if you don't. So, all right. Are there any other questions? Issues we should bring up?
Just quick question too, with this all going on, is there any concerns with engineering, like with Kramer ditches, with the flow, change of flow of water and the overflow, the impact? I don't know what impacts that. I guess, could that be an engineering thing? Will that be considered or?
Yes, so that is included as a condition of approval that during the building permit, they have
Okay.
to provide plans for the current utility and the proposed
Okay.
to be inspected and approved.
I
by
figured it
engineers.
was outside our scope, but I just wanted to make sure that Kramer ditch is still there. So we just don't want to be messing with off flow and water flow to the ditch. So.
Okay, if we work through the motions, because we'll still be talking about these, do we need to specify? Sean, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, for the garage door waiver, can we just say you're going to go to a material that could we do that? Because it will,
Yes.
if it's composite, it still would need I don't know how we handle that, but if you go to composite, could we condition it's that and it?
We can condition it that way,
Okay.
and if you can give us just a couple moments, I was gonna sort of pop up and revise the conditions as we've heard them so far, and then let's see what you think.
Good idea.
Sounds good.
I think a lot of people from a maintenance point of view would say the composite would be the better door.
The composite was getting good marks for the insulation factors. Not even, the maintenance wasn't even the first consideration. It was how wood doors are better for insulating. Obviously, metal doors are maybe less costly, but composite doors make the best insulators. So that was interesting to find.
They're also more sustainable, you're not using wood,
Yeah.
as much wood, or you're using waste wood to make the composite. So anyway, I think they're better
Unless
doors.
it's made with reclaimed, I guess.
Well, you're right. You can insulate the composite door because it's usually made as a sandwich. It's not.
Right.
It's not just.
Right. So that might be
Well, and here the exposure is south. So yeah, the exposure is going to be in a high where it's just going to
not as bad as if it were west. though.
sun. Well, you get.
Oh, yeah, sun.
Yes,
You're
you get a
right.
lot of
Fraction.
sunshine.
Except for the
from that
neighboring
south
house
side.
is so close to the tree canopy's pretty high.
Maybe right.
Gary, can we go back to that page where you were talking about the two elevations and how you wanted to address that for a second?
I think she's, or maybe.
She's going to
somebody can-
address it with her conditions, but I just wanted to,
I think, well, if somebody can, because I think they're rewriting, so they can't pull it up on the monitor.
oh, I got you. Yes.
But if somebody can pull it up on their laptop.
No, that's all right. I'll wait.
I also just to mention, like, I know that they had mentioned like lowering this floor for the structure, and I just wanted to, point that out, that it's because we're already coming, like the grade is coming down the hill from the west to the east. It's, unless we do significant amount of grading, it's not really possible to lower that floor.
We didn't include that.
Yeah, we didn't.
That's.
I just
not-
wanted. to
You're
make
talking
sure
about the
that we-
basement
because I
going
know
from
there
down
was-
to 9 to 8 or whatever. Yeah, we didn't even.
Okay.
We're okay.
Okay. Okay, so this will be the last thing we vote on, but it's good to check, because we'll go through the waivers first, but it's good to check this language now, yeah, while we're talking, so. Well, you didn't have, okay, yeah, keep it up, okay. Yeah, okay, so let's go through these, okay, so, and the two of you should read these as well, because we want to make sure if we vote on these that you're comfortable with what's here. I'm not going to read these into the minutes because there'll be a written copy of these. You don't need me to read them into the minutes, do you?
Should it say instead of left?
All right, I'll read it.
Well-
Okay. Okay. All right. So here we now will have, there's not a condition on another page, is it? It's just these 5 conditions? Okay. So first condition, first of all, we're going to vote on an approval of the minor project review with the following conditions. The design elevations shall be revised to the hybrid option, also lowering the roof pitch on the left shed section and providing a greater jog between the sections, to be approved by staff prior to building permit.
And I was going to suggest that instead of the word left, that be stated as like the north. I think that's the north shed section or a direction, because it's left if you're facing from the back. Is that a problem? Do you think that sounds weird, or? You
No,
guys
I
think
probably all
it's
think
smart.
that's
I
okay,
think
but
it's smart.
I just wanted to
Yeah, I
make
think that's a
sure
good
we
idea.
knew whose left we were on.
Okay.
And you guys understand this too. Okay, thank you.
Okay. You okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Then what's now considered 4, the elevation shall.
2, right? Be new number 2.
Okay. So we're going to renumber these. So it'll be a renumbered 2. Elevation shall be revised to show the use of smooth hardy board siding at building permit. Next condition, provide utility plans detailing the scope of work and any modifications to the existing utilities at the building permitting stage to be reviewed, approved, and inspected by engineering. Garage doors shall be changed to composite to be shown prior to building permit. Do you want to be reviewed by staff prior to building permit? Would that be, and that's probably language that we should insert at number, the last one as well, instead of to be shown prior to building permit, to be reviewed by staff prior to building permit.
We can repeat that same language in
Okay.
condition number 1 to be approved by staff prior to building permit.
Okay. Are you okay with those 5 conditions?
The only one I wanted to ask about was the stone water table, the limestone cap. Could that be a cultured limestone cap?
I think that's fair. That's what we approved on the last one. Yeah.
Right, thank you.
Then yes,
We can-
everything else is good.
Okay.
And renumber.
We can go back up.
Well, the conditions for the minor project review do not include the waivers. We're going to, there is a roof vent in the hybrid. So, if they still want that waiver and they want to keep that, we can keep that, or you could just have a linear ridge vent in the metal roof.
Can you repeat that?
Well, now you're only going to have one of the gable vents. So But in the metal roofs, and most of the new metal roofs that are going on newer structures in the district, that vent is actually now done underneath the cap. So, and that's what you can do with your hip. You could do that back there if you don't feel the need for that waiver anymore, or if you want to keep it in. It's kind of your call. It'll be the.
So you
only-
just mean removing the gable vent at the west elevation?
On the west,
Could you put the
then
hybrid-
we don't need the waiver. If,
Right, yeah, we're fine with
That's fine.
removing that.
okay.
The hybrid, just bring
Yeah.
it, 'cause I don't think it's in that. I think the vent is out in the hybrid. I think if we pick hybrid, I don't think there is a vent, at least in that picture, right? Yeah. so-
Okay, so the waiver, okay, so you
I mean,
already,
it just
you
makes
already,
somehow
took-
we-
you already took the vent out.
With no vent, I don't know if that was on
Okay.
purpose.
Then you probably already took that waiver off your list of waivers. Okay,
Okay.
Okay,
Here,
so-
'cause on the hybrid, then we would, it's not shown, there's no vent on the hybrid.
Or do
On
they
the-
need to withdraw the request? for the
they had just indicated that we don't need the waiver anymore because they are not going to put that gable vent in.
So we'll take that gable vent out and we'll use it, whatever the user would think.
So we just don't have the waiver.
Yep.
And I don't think we have to amend anything because
It's
it's
not
not,
in the
it's not shown there.
Just take it away.
Do they need to formally withdraw the request for waiver?
Honestly, it would be cleaner to just vote no on the waiver and be done with it,
Okay.
if that's okay.
I like it.
Let's not overcomplicate it.
Thad would be proud of you. Okay. All right. Okay, do we have everything rewritten? Let's review the language once more, since we have
Yep.
two, possibly more lawyers on the board. So let's just read through this, make sure everybody's comfortable with it.
Just to mention, number 7 should still say cultured stone. or
Yes, I don't-
cultured limestone.
I don't think
cap.
Roddy heard that when
Yep.
we mentioned that, but
And do we need to renumber those two?
it could be, you could write it so that it says, if you want to go back to that, and I can give you some language, water table. Okay. Cap on water table shall be cultured stone or limestone, because it's really the cap that we're talking about. And then you have the option. You can do it cultured stone, you can do it limestone.
And take out
But the cap is what's on top of that. So it's the cap on the water table shall be cultured stone. It has to be a veneer. It shall be cultured stone or limestone to be approved by staff prior to building permit. Is that okay? Okay.
veneer.
Use of veneer is tricky because if some people feel it's not structural, whether it's cultured or real, it's a veneer. So I just think cap is a
So
little bit
take
more,
out-
no, she'll put the language up. Let's see what comes up.
I'm getting a lesson in veneer.
Every month you get a lesson. It's good.
Yeah, that way they can, it gives them the flexibility of,
Gary, is this okay? The way she's written it, it's okay.
that way they have the flexibility. You may not like the color of, and actually the limestone may be closer to the stone in your house, so, but you can decide. Okay, So should we go through all right, let's go through the waivers. Let's go back. All right. All right, so the first one is to vote on the roof pitch waiver. Okay, so is there a motion to approve the roof pitch waiver?
In accordance with the hybrid design.
Because it's just the shed roof
Your mic's
now.
not on.
It would be the shed, but it
I
would
thought there was
also
another
be-
roof too.
Hyphen is.
It's a hyphen
Hyphen.
also. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Okay.
Shed and hyphen.
Do we want that one? Board members, do you want that rewritten? Approval of the roof pitch waiver for
I
the rear
guess it
shed.
depends on how the motion is written. I mean, how the application is written. Right here, it just says of the roof pitch waiver, it never specified in the first place anyway. So it really depends on what the application says.
In the report, it outlines all 3 roof pitch waivers that are necessary, and with the hybrid option, you need all 3 of them.
All right,
Okay.
now answer my question. Do you want this more specific, or do you want to leave the language and say it's going to refer to the report?
We can refer to the report.
Yeah, that's fine.
Page 11 of the report, yeah.
All right, I will move that we approve the roof pitch waiver as described in the report.
I'll second that.
Staff report. I'll amend my motion.
And I'll second that again.
Okay,
Ms. Cooper,
Oh, I'm voting yes.
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 Now, the second waiver, since we've made it a condition that, of the minor project review, is this needed or do we vote no?
The composite still needs a waiver, right?
Yeah, composite, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yes, on previous projects, the composite
That's
did
right.
require the waiver, so we're changing slightly the condition of the waiver.
Okay, all right.
So I would like to move to approve the garage door waiver to allow the applicant to use a composite garage door.
And I'll second that.
Mr. Cotter,
Yes.
Ms. Damasser,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Ms. Cooper,
Yes,
Mr. Alexander.
Yes. Okay, now, this is the one where the motion.
I got it here. We'll
Okay.
deny it.
Okay,
I'm going to move to deny
No,
the
just-
request for waiver for the gable.
We're just going to vote no. Don't double negative it. Yeah, just to approve it.
so do you,
So you need to amend your motion then.
Yeah, you
to,
have to amend the
Yeah.
motion.
to approve it, and then you can vote no.
Yeah.
Okay, I will amend my motion to say, I move to approve the gabled vent waiver for the project.
all right, is there a second?
Sure, I'll second.
Mr. Jewell,
No.
Ms. Damasser,
No.
Mr.
Changed my
Cotter.
mind.
Mr. Cotter, yes.
No.
Mr. Alexander,
No,
Ms. Cooper.
No.
okay. All right, last one. Okay,
Just withdraw.
so now we have the minor project review, right?
Yep. Should be the last one. Condition. Okay.
All right, so is there a move for approval of the minor project review with the following 5 conditions? Or the 5 conditions as documented?
I'll make a motion to approve the minor project review with the 5 listed conditions.
Second.
Ms. Damasser,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes,
Mr. Cotter,
Yes.
Ms. Cooper.
Yes.
you passed. All right, thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you
Okay,
so
all
much.
All right.
Thank you.
Good luck. All right. All right, so now we're on to communications. So
This is going very
Hi, everybody. So I am here tonight to give a little update about some conversations we've had at a city council level about the code. Their conversation has largely been around preservation as it relates to demolition of structures and some conversations around that. So I will talk about what their conversations have been, but I thought maybe to start, I would talk through where we've been, because I think that sort of helps the context, especially since we have some new board members. And again, there might be some people watching online, and I'll talk about why that might be the case as I get through. I had the opportunity to attend a neighborhood meeting this weekend to talk about this as well. And this might be helpful just for some context. So, and definitely, it is a presentation, but it's meant to be more of a dialogue. So if you have questions or something isn't clear, just let me know. So again, previous historic district efforts, most, I guess, back to 2012 timeframe. Prior to that, again, we have had our architecture review district under the purview of ARB. Prior to the historic district being integrated in the Bridge Street Code, it was very similar to how it is now, where there's individual districts within the historic district that had their own set of requirements under ARB's purview. So then in 2012, when we created the Bridge Street Code, we then took the historic district and integrated that as part of the Bridge Street District, knowing that we wanted to have that form-based code overlaying all the districts within the Bridge Street, which then outlined permitted building types. It was, again, largely about setting up the street network, which in the historic district already exists, but really looking at building types and very specific architectural requirements, and sort of the unintended consequences of that, which we found out through development projects coming forward. It really permitted for greater density and intensity and building heights within the historic district. And there was a lot of concerns that were raised related to that, which get to some subsequent amendments and to our most recent one in 2021, which I'll get to here in a second. But again, that's really critical because we wanted to make sure that the historic district is integrated appropriately. So that being done in the Bridge Street District, as I mentioned, had some unintended consequences. So then in 2017, we were asked to do a historic and cultural assessment. So that was really looking at an inventory of all the historic and cultural resources throughout the city. So we hired a consultant to help us conduct that assessment, and they provided a very lengthy, detailed document that's available on our website. And I think it's also in your sort of digital materials resource guide as well. But it helped us update our Ohio historic inventory. So it really documented every single property that is 50 years or older and the integrity and details of each of those resources. So there is a larger recommendation section of the assessment, but then as you've seen with projects, individual sheets about individual properties and their historic integrity. So that was a product of that assessment, as well as then words, the contributing, non-contributing nomenclature that we've come to use recently within our code and our guidelines. So that was sort of the outcropping of that, of properties that contribute to the historic character of the city and those that do not. So we used the information from that as a resource moving forward when we were looking at future code amendments, including how the code is currently outlined. So then also in 2016, approved in 2017, given the location of the historic district and the requirements under the Bridge Street District, we undertook an amendment to the historic South District. So that's the majority of the properties along South High Street that are south of 161 or Bridge Street. So knowing that the character of those buildings, particularly along High Street, that wanting to restrict building heights and intensity and density along that South High Street corridor. This again was really to address, we had seen some proposals that proposed development that was largely out of scale with the character of the district, particularly in that area. And that's a lot where a lot of historic structures are on that South High Street corridor from a commercial standpoint. So we then undertook this code amendment and added that historic South district and restricted the building forms that were permitted within that district to address that. And then again, we had, following that, then the opportunity to develop a historic district task force to just understand how are we achieving the goals of council and the community related to the historic district. So a task force was created just to further this conversation, looking at the vitality of the district, again, given uses and changes over time. We've seen a lot of sort of our uses that would draw people down there being more static uses. So how do we look at the vibrancy of the district? What should we be focusing on from a preservation standpoint? What are key concerns? Because again, it's a jewel of our city and it's a small area and we want to make sure that we're preserving that in line with what the community wants. So the task force had the opportunity to review many factors of that and ultimately came up with a list of recommendations to further this conversation, including then the recommendation to update the historic Dublin area plan, which is located within our community plan. So we are in the process of doing that now with the community plan update, which is very, very timely. But also the discussion about the historic district and somebody that sort of eats, sleeps, breathes. So the management of the district. How do we help support local businesses? How do we help support residences? And again, that vitality component of that. So that was sort of the outcropping and recommendations based on the task force engagement. And then also their support of then our most recent efforts, which was the adoption of the code and the guidelines in early 2021. So that was a multi-year process. Again, then given the conversations of the task force and as a result of Bridge Street, it was decided that the historic district should come out of the Bridge Street and sort of revert back to what it was before, where there were individual districts, which individual standards and the form-based code standards that were in the Bridge Street code should not be applied anymore. That was just not getting the results that we really saw for maintaining the character of the district. So that was over a significant period of time. ARB reviewed that on many, many occasions. A lot of stakeholder and public input for that. But again, really stressing the importance of the preservation of historic resources, but also understanding that infill and redevelopment are really key component. And how do we make sure that that fits within the character of the district? So I just thought that would be helpful to just set the stage of how we got to where we are. Are there any questions about that? Okay. So then I just going to give obviously you're familiar with the code and the guidelines, but obviously the code applicability as it currently stands, applying to the historic district, Appendix G properties, those standards are, again, very objective in nature. They're sort of the numerical requirements, materials, site development standards, design standards in terms of, as we talked about tonight, materials, signs, those types of key components, and then the review process being part of that. Specifically in the code, obviously, if we're using that nomenclature of the contributing, non-contributing. If you're a contributing structure, you really have to demonstrate that economic hardship, that there really is no other alternative, right? So it's very, very hard, as it should be, to demolish a historic property, given that we want to try to preserve that character. So then juxtaposed against the non-contributing, where you have one of three criteria, which could include that economic hardship, or that you don't have any historic or architectural features that should be preserved, or that it's impeding orderly development. So the threshold between the two is vastly different. So this became part of this conversation that City Council was having about how modifications are made to properties, whether that's through demolition or additions. What's the appropriate criteria and how do we apply that? Again, in terms of the guidelines, as I mentioned, similar geography, clearly those are a little bit more subjective, looking at the larger character and context of the district, that those are really the key factors that we're looking at for the guidelines. Again, with that preservation rehab focus on original historic buildings versus new buildings. In addition, our focus is on compatibility and appropriateness. So in March of 2022, as part of City Council's retreat, they have, again, been having ongoing discussions about the district and how do we make sure, are we hitting the mark with the code amendments that we've made, from comments that we've heard from residents and business owners that have been through the process. What are we hearing from people and how do we make sure that we're sort of hitting that mark? So council created a goal in 2022 to look at those details and understand from a staff perspective, based on our input and time with the code and working with this, what should council be looking at? So they created, one of their goals for last year was, again, looking at that management piece of that. How do we help ensure the vitality of the district? But then also this preservation question of, are we preserving the right things? Are we holding people to the right standards, the right scrutiny? And how do we help you all make informed decisions? How does staff help provide guidance to that as well? So as the result of their retreat, they came up with that goal. We then had a subsequent discussion at a work session in April of last year where we talked through these in detail. So similar, going through the process of how we got to where we are through that large public engagement conversation with the code. Demolition criteria, contributing, non-contributing. There's some concern about how that's being applied from council's perspective, and are we using that to the best of our ability? Is there some other language? What's the most period of significance that we should be looking at when we're making decisions and determinations about development within the district? So they asked staff to do some additional research, which I'll share here in a second, looking at historic properties. And again, so we have our architecture review district, so our larger district. We then, within that district, have a area that is our National Register district, our South High Street district. So it's a smaller geography that have, as a district within our little district, our National Register boundary. And then there are individual properties that are either in that red National Register district or also just individual properties within the larger historic district that are individually listed. And where are those properties that we want to, where do we sort of provide this level of scrutiny, particularly as it relates to demolition? So what's that threshold of time that those properties fall into, and if we wanted to preserve those more wholly and provide more scrutiny for demolition for those properties, what does that then result in? So how many properties could be then reviewed under this lesser scrutiny for demolition, and what does that look like? But again, council really wanting the code and the guidelines to remain, knowing that those are so new, and wanting to see what the outcome of that is, because we just adopted these code and the guidelines to understand, we got to see it work in action, right, to make sure that it's achieving the results. So I was back before council on Monday to share the results of our research for them. And so again, they provided us some feedback and discussion. So as I mentioned, and on your screen and the big screen, so as I mentioned, so the darker aerial part is are these showing on your screens? Okay. Is the larger architecture review district boundary. Then you'll see that red boundary within sort of that southern portion. That's our South High Street National Register district. And all those properties within that area then are part of that larger district. Then you'll see the orange properties either within that red boundary or individually highlighted throughout the district. Those are ones that are specifically listed on their own. And then there's blue properties that we are, I'll share what that is here in a second, and then gray. So what staff was recommending based on council's direction was that properties in the green that are highlighted green in that red boundary, as well as properties that are individually listed, that those would continue to have that higher level of scrutiny for demolition. And when we looked at that, the time period for what this period of significance for those particular green and the orange properties ranged from 1830 to 1920, because we were trying to determine, right, like what is this period of significance? How do we think about this in a way that is meaningful? So then the blue properties outside of the red historic or the National Register boundary are then properties that either fall within that same time period, that 1830s to 1920s, or they have some context or character defining features or architectural style that we would want to preserve. So such as the post office where Fox in the Snow is going to be in there. That's a very iconic sort of modern building that we would want to preserve. So that's outside that time period, but really important to the character of the district. So things like that. And then the other properties that are listed as gray or not recommended, those could potentially be under less scrutiny for demolition. So not that there's none, they would just not necessarily have to meet that higher threshold. And then this would allow for, potential demolition and redevelopment should they be able to meet the criteria. But again, all of this coming back to you, so the process wouldn't change. That would not be different. And again, we're looking at the criteria to make sure that aligns with, and I'll talk through the next steps of this here in a second, but really wanting to understand what that could look like. So that's what we presented to council. There was a good discussion about it, and not a unanimous decision, but the largest consensus of council was to go with this recommendation. There was some concerns raised about properties that are not recommended. And what does that mean what are sort of the unintended consequences of that, right? So how do we help mitigate that and wanting to understand that? So we talked through that as well. But the largest consensus of council was that we could move forward with looking at the code and the guidelines to address this as we move forward. So that was our discussion as part of Monday's council meeting. And as you'll see, when you look at the gray properties within the historic district that would be subject to this, I guess, lesser burden of scrutiny, there are 18 properties that this would impact. So it's not, we're preserving a majority of our those are truly historic from that 1830s to 1920, and again, additional ones outside that time period for their iconic status. So, because again, there's a number of properties that are already not contributing, right? So the ones that would be able to have this lesser scrutiny is around 18. So council's discussion, as I mentioned then, was to remove this contributing, non-contributing language. So we would come up with some other nomenclature, whether that's local landmarks or some other distinguishing language to help us understand what this might be. Looking at the demolition criteria, so right now it's 1 of 3. Previously it was 2 of 4, and there was a 4th criteria. So I think we're all open to what that looks like, so that you all feel like you have enough opportunity to scrutinize applications that come before you, and any other minor related changes in the code. Council also discussed the opportunity to potentially expand the administrative approvals opportunity. So if someone's doing something really minor, whether it's lighting or things that you would typically leave to staff to approve at a later phase, and again, we can come up with what those criteria would be and those instances would be. But again, trying to make it user-friendly for applicants, for residents, so they wouldn't necessarily have to go through a process if it met the appropriate criteria. So looking at what those administrative approvals might be as well. So then, as I mentioned, opportunity to meet with some residents within the historic district on Saturday morning. So there were about 35, 40 residents in attendance. So I gave a similar presentation talking about the background, talking about council's discussion, and then had just some dialogue and questions with them to answer their questions. So there were some concerns about, are the uses changing? Are some of those, so I was dispelling some of those concerns that were not, suggesting that that changes be made at this point. That's not part of this at all. So really what's permitted now would continue to be permitted. We had a lot of discussion about then if something is demolished, what can be put in its place, right? So what do they have to meet? So we talked a lot about the code and the guidelines and how that applies. Again, we would keep the same standards. At least at this point, that's what we're we proposed to council was everything else sort of stays the same, with some clarifications that need to be met for the demolition part. And again, there was not a lot of concern or not in favor of this demolition recommendation. It was really largely lots of concerns raised about the review process in general. So I was kind of surprised to hear the concerns raised about that and the rigor of review and the amount of detail and the length of time. So this was a good opportunity for me to hear what those concerns are. And this was shared more generally. So wanting to understand that a little bit more fully, that's my next step for this, is really to hear, are there specific things that we can do to help make this clearer for applicants, for residents, as this moves forward. Again, there is some subjectivity to this, right? And I talked a lot about this. This is an art, not a science, right? So, I mean, there's the numerical requirements, but each house is different, each site is different, and we need to be mindful of that as we review each of these properties. So, and again, everyone that lives in the district lives there for a reason, because they love the character and the context. So how do we help understand what the concerns are and navigate that process? Again, it's a new code, it's new requirements, so things have changed over the last couple of years. So how do we help understand that more fully? So,
Jenny, just quick, I mean,
yeah,
just on,
please, yeah.
on the concern shared,
Mhm.
challenging review, I'm assuming they meant it was too challenging?
Yes,
I mean,
sorry,
I mean,
yes.
that's what they weren't saying
Yes,
it's under
yes.
challenge. Okay.
It was a
so
challenge, yes.
They're saying it's too
Yes,
rigorous.
and again, that's also that's on staff as
Yeah.
well, so that we're holding people to very high standards, given what our charge has been, and that's, again, it's a rigorous, and if you're a resident, right, if you're a layperson, that's really hard to do that. So how do we help navigate that? Yeah.
To go back to council's concern that gave birth to this whole research project, was the concern that there's too much demolition going on, they were proving too much, or that we're not proving enough?
I think it's more about what's the right combination. It's not necessarily that there's too much or too little. It's that how are we applying the standards? Are there properties where maybe that we could be looking at this from a different perspective? And again, going back to that contributing, non-contributing piece of that, we have been using that very critically when applications come forward, and maybe that there's some concern that maybe we shouldn't be using that as fully as we have. So should we be looking at some other criteria for which to review each of these properties? So that's what
I'm just trying to figure out if there was a series of incidents or a history that was causing this concern.
Again, I don't know of any specific examples where, I wish we wouldn't have proved that or not. I'm not aware of that. That's not been part of their conversation. I think it's just generally, what are we preserving? How are we using the code and the guidelines and are we achieving the results everybody wants? So, just trying to navigate that process.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it's a great question, which is again also why I want to have further conversations with the residents to understand, are there things we can do from our perspective, or is there something in the code that's not clear, or the guidelines, or is there something that could be tightened up that help them feel like it's more predictable? So
yeah, well, I can that specific bullet point, the concern shared, challenging review process, and all that we've seen here many times when they get very frustrated. So I can understand.
Yeah. Right. So how do we help navigate that? So, so one more slide, then I'm done. So when we were before council, we had talked about, obviously this is would be a change to the code and the guidelines. So this would follow our normal review process. So staff would bring forward modifications to the code and the guidelines to ARB to look at. And then that you make a recommendation to Planning Commission, and then Planning Commission makes a recommendation to council, and they make the final determination. So there'd be public input and review throughout that process. So I'm just, again, here tonight just to share where we are. No decision obviously being made tonight. And we have, following the conversation with the residents, then our recommendation is to, as part of our community plan update, we would talk through this area plan specifically, but as part of that, my intent is to then work, we have a consultant that's been, Greg Dale has been helping us with this project for many years. So my intent is to work with him to see how we can have a facilitated conversation with the residents to understand, again, more fully what the concerns are and share those back through the process. So we will be bringing something forward for review. The timing, I was originally thinking that was going to happen sooner, but given some of the comments, I want to more fully understand that. So we're not bringing one part forward that doesn't necessarily answer some other concerns as well. So what other questions can I answer?
I just want to add, to give Hillary and some of the newer board members some perspective. We've really been hamstrung, this board has, by the way the cultural assessment categorized contributing and non-contributing. And there have been buildings that they considered contributing in the report that don't have significant architectural features and that maybe are contributing for a less obvious reason. And so when we've had applicants come before us, and I can think of a couple immediately that are coming to mind, and we've had to say, by definition, and they've had a good case in a couple examples, a good case. Why can't I tear this down? And because no architectural historian would have said this building is significant. And working with it was really hard. But they were forced to have this go through this process, which I think can be onerous if it's really not an architecturally significant structure, to prove that it's coming down. And we had some that just got fed up, and we just tried to make suggestions to them. And they walked away and they weren't happy. So it has that definition, and the way we're forced to work with that has contributed to some of these issues. So I'm sure that some of the council members are hearing that, and that's. But I do think the idea has merit. Yeah. But I do think it's important because that the standards maintain. Because you can see, if you look at that map, suddenly the value of those properties along the river goes way up. If you don't have some kind of standards to at least control the zoning standards, that control the mass and an approval process. Because now they don't have to go through the kind of process for demolition. So somebody sees that, they can do a lot more with the structure. And some of those structures are kind of modest. So the scale, if you don't have the zoning in place and you don't have some guidelines in place, the scale could change dramatically along that street. And because it's nice, you're along the river, it's hard to build because of the slope, but still.
Oh, definitely. We have had some very large structures come forward from along the river where demolition was determined, they had met the criteria for demolition. And when they come back. Sorry. Anyway, I echo what Gary is saying about that concern, because it's a frequent comment by new people coming in who want to and maybe meet the demolition criteria for an existing structure that's, like Gary said, very modest. And then we've had lot splits where one modest structure has become two very, very large projects. We've also had situations where the building is not contributing. And the new build, they are seeking something that is significantly greater in mass for a purpose of financial balance, or to make it work, to quote a phrase, to make it work financially for the investment. I can imagine that some of those projects would not be well received by another group of the residents within that district. Because now suddenly you have a very large new structure, maybe next door to an old structure. So it's a very difficult task to balance on the review side.
When you met with the residents, did you have any, because he doesn't come anymore, but, we had one resident and he was right in a lot of his comments. He'd come all the time and say, why have you approved this? Because on one hand, I can see where people say the process is onerous, but I can also see, and one of our former board members wrote something regarding projects that were approved. So did you get feedback that people weren't pleased with some of the things that were built as a result of the review process?
I mean, I think that is true, and that is why we've changed the code. And to your point, Marty, too, about how to balance that, right? So we heard from one group, we then need to hear from everyone else, which is why this area plan update conversation helps bring this into a larger context. So we're hearing from a wider cross section. Again, I think that was part of the conversation with them is exactly that. If things are demolished, then what gets to go up in its place? So if you're on Franklin Street and you're surrounded by ranches and somebody demos a ranch, can you build a 2-story house? Well, the code would let you build a house X, feet tall to get probably to a 2-story. You would be subjected to the same building coverage requirements and limitations, lot coverage limitations, but then the guidelines would have to help kick in from a character context standpoint. So again, it's still that objective, subjective sort of coming together. But again, if they could make a compelling argument that they should have a 2-story where they had a 1-story and you all felt that was appropriate, that is entirely possible. So I think both your points are very well made about we need to make sure that what they're being subjected to when they come in to build something new, what is that, do we have enough protections in the code so we're not dramatically changing the character? Because there was a lot of concerns of, well, then all these properties that have a lower level of scrutiny, people are going to potentially be buying them and demolishing them to build something greater. Like that is entirely possible. So what are those unintended consequences and how do we make sure that, yes, maybe we would allow demolition, but what goes back in its place is equally important. So.
I think it's perfect. I think as we try to define, there are probably properties that are imperative that stay.
Right.
Right. And I think this helps.
Yeah.
Define that in a more rigorous way that, if you come in to do something in these, whatever the property, the ones that were in green or blue, whichever ones they were.
Yeah.
I think that's great. Cause I think now it gives us it gives everybody who buys them or sees them that these properties, if you buy this, and you want to do something, it means something and it's going to be economic. It's going to be, there's going to be a tangible result if you take on a property like that. So I think that's really good. Okay. And I think trying to understand a bit more how the language of demo on the rest of the properties. And then I think there's going to have to be somewhere that the guidelines then are strength is probably not the right, because you want flexibility. You want to be able to do stuff in there, but to make sure that somehow that, you can't build at 25 feet in a certain spot. So somehow there's sensitivity to that. People are going to buy, everybody's going to want them to be taller. Right? I mean, if you look at Franklin Street, let's say, for example, people are going to want them to likely to get taller, right? So how do we make sure we balance that? Yeah, okay, you can take it down because it's a lower scrutiny, but be aware that you can tear it down, but then you may struggle to get something approved, right? So I just want to make sure that everybody's kind of on the same page. The onerousness is the unknown. If people know, okay, I can tear it down, but the code says this, the guideline says that.
Right.
And if they're clear, then it's a little easier when they come in, maybe they're not happy, but they're, let's say, less mad that we might not approve that because the 2 houses beside you are 14 feet or something like that. So if we can,
no, that's,
try not to box everybody in because things evolve, but somehow clarity when people know these things, it will help. It'll help us.
Yeah, all of us, staff too.
So, it'll help everybody that we're not arguing about something that we all know when they tear it down, it's going to fit somehow, and somehow, either the architect, the applicant,
Sure.
just are like, okay, but I can put 27 feet in there. So,
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Yeah, and we can definitely share so the map has several subsequent sheets that then inventoried every single property in the district that's color coded so you can see the year, and it's a picture, a front elevation. So that will be part of our further discussions too, is to make sure that are there any other properties that should be added or subtracted based on your point, like what are sort of those iconic, local landmarks that we really don't, if they're outside of those, sort of the individually listed in that National Register district, what else should be included, could be included. So we can provide that to you too. Any other comments or questions? Good feedback. Thank you. I know it's a little unprecedented to be here with a large presentation, but I just wanted to give you some context because it's a really important topic that impacts all of us. So,
Well, I would also raise the concern about balancing this demolition and new build concept again with properties that they are retaining the historic structure, but adding on to it, just like we had tonight. And sometimes the add-ons are significant. So now the property next door is saying, well, look, you doubled your square footage there with your add-on.
Yeah.
Now I want to double my square footage. Yeah. So there's a lot of balancing going on and I could see where in the case of Franklin Street, for one, that you would potentially have properties that would say, point to the neighbors or point to the next street over. And I also think about some of the properties there in the north side of High Street, where we have sometimes conflicting interests between the businesses in that area. One of the favorites is they come in and say, well, look at the library across the street,
Oh, that's just a whole different.
I know, I'm just saying though, but there are businesses who have come in and wanted to redevelop in that area and have gotten a lot of feedback from us, but I can imagine that they have expressed their concerns.
great. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks for attending our meeting. You sat through the whole thing. That's right.
Thanks, Jenny. I do have some other quick communications for you. So the next item is the 3D imaging and modeling that we've been talking about for the district. We finally are wrapping that project up. And what we would like to do is bring a demonstration to you at either June or July's meeting, depending on, staff availability and docket
Sounds great.
numbers. And I think that would be a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be a very, very good tool for us. The alternate materials document. It's been a little while since we've talked about that. That's been moving along slowly but surely. And we're still working on it with an estimated completion time, perhaps the end of summer, to be truly realistic about it.
Okay.
The Bridge Street Bridge is due to be reconstructed in 2027, according to our engineering folks. And I'm just starting to work with them about what is going to happen to that historic structure. They are in the planning and design stages now. And we know that we want to get pedestrian improvements along that bridge to, give pedestrians a greater feeling of safety instead of being sort of out next to the through lanes. We will be having an information session on that probably early fall, late summer, but I just wanted you to be aware that that project was starting to ramp up a bit.
Can I interject something here?
Of course.
Can you get them to open Riverview Street through the bridge? Because that would make an enormous difference on what can be done with those properties. And that would create such an incentive for those properties to return to viable, because now they're a part of a neighborhood. Now, there may be some people on South Riverview who don't like that, but that would really help those properties. And I think that was the first kiss of death for those properties, is isolated and not a part of a neighborhood. So I'm sure when I first brought this up to one of the council members, she kind of laughed and said, "Oh, that's the Ohio Department of Natural, or not, Ohio Department of Transportation. You're never going to be able to do that." But if they're going to redesign it, and that was Amy who said that, because I told her the same thing. She said, "Oh, no, you forget about it. That's not possible." But if they're redesigning that bridge, why can't you ask the question? Now, there's a lot of other politics that have to be sorted out. But I think if people are looking for a way to give those houses a new birth, linking them with the community is the first step.
I can certainly ask. It's a great idea.
Well,
I will do that.
just a thought.
Yeah, I'll do that. And then finally, 32 West Bridge Street. This is the Bet in the old brick building. They are looking to possibly repair their original wood windows. Since this is a repair effort, it would not come before the board. But if this happens, and I got a call from a contractor earlier this week, you may see some boarded up windows. And just FYI, if we see it, that's what's going on. And it does sound like a window repair expert. Mike, you can probably discuss for hours the window repair
window.
techniques. But yeah, that would be for probably a couple of weeks where those windows might be boarded up. And that's all I have.
What's the date of our meeting next month?
28th.
And Sarah, I'm out in June. I will not be here.
Yes.
I'll be in El Salvador, so be out.
Okay.
I wanted to suggest something, and I don't want to, I always feel bad about Nicole Martin because she did the paints 3 different times based on on board comments, and maybe that's why she left. I hope not. But anyways, because I don't want you to have to do the alternative materials a second time, and maybe this isn't germane, but all the comments I hear about the council and the way we count some council members and the way they market the community is we're this really green community. Well, shouldn't our building materials and the materials that we approve reflect that? And so shouldn't, like tonight, never approve a vinyl window, because vinyls, some environmentalists say it's the next asbestos. So anything with vinyl, the FIPON, which is foam. And so when you make foam, you have all kinds of outgassing, another material. So all of these products that people are bringing to us have environmental implications, either direct or indirect based on the way they're made. So is that something that should be incorporated in what we do when we approve materials? Is sustainability. The garage door was a perfect example. You have steel, which really takes a lot of energy to create, but they could be insulated. So it's going to save energy. But it seems to me if, and I know this is part of this larger plan the community is putting together, but if the community is marketing themselves that way, then maybe things the board do should reflect that. So
Including
just
solar panels?
Well, that's the most obvious one. And they're trying to deal with legislation for that.
In general, but what about in the historic district? Because that's
We already have language for that.
Yeah.
So that would permit it in certain cases. So, but I just think that something maybe we should think about. Well, yeah, you might want, maybe Amy should be brought into that conversation too, since she's our council liaison.
Yeah, and we have a architectural consultant that the Planning Commission uses to look at materials specifically. So he might be able to take a closer look at sustainability and environmental friendliness.
And then the last question I had, there was a resident of the district who a year or so ago came here and asked us about cataloging the primary trees in the district, so that there was sort of a list or document of things that should be protected. Did anything ever come of that?
We have been working on an internal matrix of
Okay.
trees, and Josh continues to pin the landmark trees. And that is one of the things on the wish list of clarifying items for the code update that we would ask Greg to take care of, because it is unclear, the residential versus commercial aspect of it, and I think we can update some of that criteria.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. We adjourned? Okay. All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Oh, thank you.